Pause for a moment. Before anything else is said, picture the wealthiest man you personally know. Not a famous billionaire, not a public figure, someone real, someone you've actually met, spoken to, maybe even spent time around. You've got him in mind? Good. Now answer honestly. How does he look physically? Is he energetic? Does he move with strength, confidence, and ease? Does he carry the vitality of someone who truly invested in his body over the years? Or is the opposite true? Is his bank account overflowing while his body quietly deteriorates? Is he financially secure yet physically depleted? Because more often than people admit, that's the reality. We've sat in rooms with men who achieved extraordinary financial success, men who built companies from nothing, men who retired with more money than they could realistically spend, men who, by every traditional measure, won the financial game. And yet we watched those same men struggle to rise from a chair. We saw them lose their breath, climbing a single flight of stairs. We noticed the expression they wore when they looked at another man their age who was still strong and capable. It wasn't admiration, it was something heavier, something quieter, regret, the kind that settles in when a man realizes, too late or nearly too late, that he optimized for the wrong target. They spent decades accumulating numbers in a bank account while something far more valuable slowly slipped away. The body that was supposed to carry them into freedom was never maintained. The vehicle meant to deliver the rewards of their success had worn down, and suddenly the victory felt incomplete. This is not a criticism of financial success, not even close. Wealth matters, financial security matters, but clarity matters more. Today we're going to examine something rarely discussed: the measurable, documented real-world value of being physically fit at 65. Not motivational fluff, not inspirational slogans. Actual outcomes. Because once you understand what the data shows, your perception of training, health, and aging changes permanently. If you're new here, welcome. This is a space built for men who refuse to fade quietly into age, men who want strength, clarity, and presence long after most people accept decline. If that sounds like you, you're in the right place. Let's begin by redefining what rich really means. Most men claim they want wealth, but when you dig deeper, what they actually want isn't money itself. They want freedom. Freedom to choose how they spend their time. Freedom to go where they want, when they want. Freedom to live without dependence, without limitation, without asking permission. That's what being rich truly represents. Money is one route to that freedom, but it's not the only one. And after 60, it becomes increasingly unreliable if health isn't there to support it, because money cannot directly purchase what health provides automatically. You can afford the trip, but not the stamina to enjoy it. You can buy the house, but not the energy to maintain it. You can pay for experiences, yet lack the capacity to participate in them fully. Research reinforces this idea. A large-scale study examining well-being and life satisfaction found that once income passes a comfortable threshold, additional earnings produce diminishing emotional returns. More money helps up to a point. After that, the improvement flattens. Physical health, however, behaves differently. Improvements in physical condition continue to raise life satisfaction across all income levels and ages. There is no plateau. The benefits compound. This creates a striking imbalance. Financial gains slow down in their impact on happiness, while physical health continues delivering returns indefinitely. That imbalance forms the foundation of everything we're discussing. Now let's talk about numbers, the kind that forces a perspective shift. The average retirement age for men hovers in the early 60s. Life expectancy lands in the mid 70s. That creates roughly a decade plus of retirement. On paper, those are the freedom years, the years men work toward their entire lives. But here's the uncomfortable part. Healthcare costs rise sharply during this period. Average annual medical spending after 65 climbs into five figures. Over a typical retirement span, that becomes a massive financial drain. Yet physically active older men consistently spend significantly less on healthcare each year than sedentary peers. That's direct savings. The indirect savings are even larger. Chronic conditions linked to inactivity, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, joint degeneration carry enormous long-term costs. Treatment, medications, reduced mobility, lost independence. These expenses accumulate year after year. The active man largely avoids them. The inactive man often absorbs them. Over time, the difference can reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. Think about that differently. A well maintained body functions like an asset producing measurable returns. It reduces costs, preserves function, and protects independence. No market volatility, no external risk, just consistent dividends paid in capability. There's another layer most people overlook: energy. Not metaphorical energy, actual usable daily vitality. Everything men imagine doing in retirement requires it: traveling, playing with grandchildren, taking on projects, being socially engaged. Even simple activities demand reserves of strength and endurance. Studies consistently show that older men who train regularly, especially with resistance exercise, report energy levels comparable to men significantly younger, not just in perception but in functional capability. They move faster, recover better, stay active longer. The difference isn't subtle, it's life defining. Now compare two men. One retires with millions saved but low energy. He can afford everything yet experiences little. Walking through airports exhausts him. Excursions feel overwhelming. He watches more than he participates. His resources exist, but he cannot deploy them fully. The other man retires with less money but far greater vitality. He travels comfortably, engages actively, plays, builds, explores. He extracts more value from every experience because his body cooperates. The gap between them isn't financial, it's physical, and that difference determines how rich their lives actually feel. Energy, in this sense, functions as currency. The man who possesses it spends more fully. The man who lacks it lives cautiously, regardless of wealth. There's also something unique about physical fitness as an asset. Financial wealth is exposed to outside forces: markets, inflation, taxes, legal risks. Physical capability isn't. Your strength can't be taxed. Your endurance can't be seized. Your balance and mobility don't crash during economic downturns. Once earned, they live inside you, protected by your own consistency. And unlike financial investments, which depend on timing and external conditions, the body responds directly to effort. Training produces results, even late in life. Research has repeatedly shown that individuals well into their 80s can gain muscle, strength, and function through resistance training. The responsiveness remains, the opportunity never disappears. This makes physical fitness a rare kind of investment, one where input reliably produces output. No broker required, no speculation, just effort converted into capability. Another concept worth understanding is compounding. In finance, early investments grow because returns generate additional returns. Fitness behaves similarly. Maintaining strength and mobility in your 60s increases the likelihood of independence in your 70s and 80s. Each year of consistency makes the next year easier. Muscle preserved today protects function tomorrow. Even men who start later still benefit. They may not match lifelong athletes, but the improvement relative to their starting point is dramatic. Gains accumulate month by month. Confidence rises, capability expands. The body rewards consistency at any age. This is where the logic becomes undeniable. Physical investment compounds forward. Every year of training reduces decline. Every improvement builds resilience. Time combined with effort amplifies the outcome. But there's a side rarely discussed: the cost of not investing. Financial poverty is visible. Physical poverty is quieter. It shows up as shrinking participation, declined invitations, reduced independence, a gradual narrowing of life. You see it in the man who can't get down on the floor with grandchildren, the one who avoids trips because he worries about keeping up, the one who sits on the sidelines during gatherings instead of being fully present. Not because he lacks money, but because he lacks capacity. This is physical poverty. And unlike financial hardship, it's rarely addressed directly. Yet its consequences are profound. Strength and walking speed are among the strongest predictors of independent living in older age. Men with higher physical function maintain autonomy significantly longer, years longer, years of making their own decisions, living in their own homes, moving on their own schedule. That independence has enormous value, financially and personally. Assisted living and long term care costs alone can consume massive resources. But beyond money, the real cost is loss of control, loss of autonomy, loss of self direction. Physical capability protects against that outcome. It extends independence. It preserves dignity. It keeps a man in charge of his own life. When you step back and assemble the full picture, the conclusion becomes hard to ignore. A fit 65-year-old isn't just someone who trains. He's someone holding a rare and powerful form of wealth, lower healthcare costs, higher energy, greater independence, a compounding asset that strengthens over time, a body capable of fully using the freedom he worked decades to achieve. Most people never see it that way. They look at him and see discipline. They don't see the hidden value. They don't see the expenses avoided, the years preserved, the autonomy protected. But once you recognize it, your perspective shifts. Training stops being about appearance. It becomes about asset management, about protecting the most valuable resource you'll ever own, about building a form of wealth that pays returns in every area that matters. And that realization changes everything. When you truly grasp the value of physical capability later in life, the conversation changes. This is no longer about looking good in the mirror. It's not about chasing aesthetics or proving something to others. It becomes a matter of wealth preservation in its most practical form, the kind that protects your independence, your experiences, and your ability to fully live inside the freedom you worked decades to create. Let's assemble the full equation. A man who reaches 65 in strong physical condition carries advantages that rarely appear on paper but dominate real life. His healthcare costs are statistically lower. His energy remains high enough to engage with the world instead of retreat from it. His risk of chronic disease drops. His balance, strength, and mobility extend the years he can live independently, and every year he maintains that condition, the benefits compound forward. This is a different category of wealth, one that can't be diluted, one that doesn't fluctuate, one that pays dividends daily rather than annually. Now consider the psychological dimension. A fit man in his mid 60s doesn't just move differently, he thinks differently. He plans further ahead. He commits to experiences. He says yes more often. He doesn't automatically assume limitation. His identity remains rooted in capability instead of caution. That shift alone reshapes the trajectory of the years ahead. Contrast that with the man whose physical capacity has declined. He begins negotiating with life. He calculates distances. He avoids effort. He hesitates before accepting invitations. His world shrinks subtly, then rapidly, not because he chooses less life, but because his body quietly enforces those limits. This is why physical fitness after 60 is not simply about health metrics. It's about the size of your life. Stronger legs mean more places you'll go. Better endurance means more hours you'll stay engaged. Greater balance means less fear of falling. More muscle means greater resilience during illness or injury. Each improvement expands your operating range, and expansion matters because retirement isn't just a finish line, it's a second phase. The quality of that phase depends almost entirely on physical capability. Two men can retire the same day with identical finances and live completely different lives. One becomes increasingly stationary, the other becomes increasingly active. One consumes time, the other creates experiences. The difference isn't luck, it's preparation. There's also the cognitive component. Physical fitness supports mental clarity. Men who remain active tend to preserve sharper thinking, faster reaction time, and stronger memory. That clarity protects decision making. It allows continued learning. It keeps a man engaged in conversations, projects, and relationships. When cognitive sharpness combines with physical strength, the result is presence. A man who is fully there, physically and mentally. He doesn't fade into the background. He remains influential in his family, his community, and his own life. That presence is difficult to quantify, but impossible to ignore. Another overlooked benefit is confidence rooted in capability. Not superficial confidence, but quiet assurance. The knowledge that your body will respond when needed, that you can carry luggage, climb stairs, walk long distances, or handle unexpected physical demands. This confidence reduces anxiety, it removes hesitation, it reinforces independence. Without it, small tasks begin to feel uncertain. With it, life remains open. And then there's the identity shift. A fit man at 65 doesn't see himself as declining. He sees himself as maintaining or even improving. He's still building, still progressing, still evolving. That mindset fuels consistency. Consistency fuels results. Results reinforce identity. The cycle becomes self sustaining. Most men underestimate this loop. They assume aging automatically means retreat. But physical training interrupts that assumption. It introduces upward momentum in a stage of life many expect to be downward. That alone transforms outlook. Consider also the social impact. People respond differently to vitality. A man who moves well, stands tall, and engages actively draws interaction. He becomes part of the energy of a room rather than observing from the edges. This leads to more conversation, more opportunity, more connection. Social engagement itself then supports longevity and well being. The opposite pattern isolates. Reduced mobility leads to reduced participation. Reduced participation leads to fewer connections. Fewer connections shrink emotional and psychological health. The spiral continues. Physical fitness breaks that spiral. It keeps a man involved. Now return to the financial lens. Avoided medical expenses, delayed dependency, extended independence. These outcomes translate into substantial savings. But even beyond money, there's a deeper value: control. Control over schedule, control over environment, control over choices. Most men value autonomy above almost everything else. The ability to wake when they choose, live where they choose, move how they choose. Physical capability protects that autonomy longer than any other factor. And this is where the idea becomes unavoidable. The body is not just part of retirement, it determines retirement. If the body functions, freedom expands. If the body declines, freedom contracts. Money alone cannot reverse that equation. So, what does being fit at 65 actually represent? It represents lower lifetime costs, higher daily energy, extended independence, stronger cognition, greater confidence, expanded experiences, preserved identity, sustained presence, and the ability to fully spend the freedom you spent decades earning. When you add those together, the value becomes enormous. Not abstract, practical, not theoretical, daily. Most men never calculate this. They look at exercise as optional. They treat training as something extra, something nice if time allows. But viewed correctly, it becomes foundational. It becomes asset protection. It becomes future planning. Showing up to train stops being a chore. It becomes a deposit. Every session adds strength, stability, and resilience. Every year of consistency increases independence. Every improvement compounds forward. This perspective removes vanity from the equation entirely. It's no longer about appearance. It's about capability, about safeguarding your freedom, about ensuring that the years you worked for remain fully usable. Once that shift happens, motivation changes. You're not working out for today. You're investing in the version of yourself who will live those years. You're building a body that can travel, lift, walk, explore, and engage. You're constructing a reserve of strength that protects you against decline. And perhaps most importantly, you're choosing not to drift, because drifting is what leads to physical poverty, gradual inactivity, slow loss of muscle, reduced balance, decreased endurance. None of it happens overnight, but over time it compounds, just like training does, only in the opposite direction. The choice then is simple but powerful: invest and expand, or neglect and contract. The men who choose investment arrive at 65 with something rare: not just money, not just time, but the ability to use both. They move freely, engage fully, participate completely. Their lives remain large. Others arrive with financial security but limited capacity. Their world narrows, their options shrink, their freedom becomes theoretical. This is why understanding the value of fitness at 65 changes everything. It reframes training as wealth creation. It positions health as asset management. It elevates consistency to strategic planning. And once you see your body this way, you stop treating it like an afterthought. You treat it like the most valuable holding you have, because it is. So invest in it. Train when it's inconvenient. Move when it's easier to sit. Eat in a way that supports strength. Sleep in a way that supports recovery. Each decision adds to the account. Each habit compounds. Each year increases the return. This isn't about perfection. It's about direction, about choosing growth over drift, capability over caution, presence over passivity. Most men never recognize the opportunity. They focus entirely on financial accumulation, while their most important asset quietly depreciates. But once you understand the real math, the decision becomes clear. A strong body at 65 is not just impressive, it's powerful, it's protective, it's liberating, it's wealth in the most practical sense, and now you know what it's worth.